Arthur Jenkins was a quiet man, the kind you might pass on the street without a second glance. For over 30 years, he'd been the janitor at the local community center in their small American town. It wasn't a glamorous job, but Arthur took pride in his work. He'd arrive before anyone else, making sure the floors gleamed and the bathrooms were spotless. He'd fix leaky faucets, change light bulbs, and sometimes, if a kid was struggling with a jump rope, he'd offer a gentle word of encouragement. His life was simple, almost solitary. He lived in a small, old house on the edge of town, a place that had seen better days but was always tidy, just like the center he cared for. Arthur wasn't the kind to seek attention. He just did what needed to be done, often staying late without being asked, just to make sure everything was perfect for the next day. He knew all the regulars at the center, the elderly ladies who played bingo on Tuesdays, the basketball league that used the gym on weekends, and especially the young, aspiring wrestlers who trained in the wrestling room, dreaming of glory. He'd watch them sometimes from the doorway, a small, kind smile on his face. He'd seen so many come and go, some full of fire, others just trying to find a place to belong. Arthur was always there, a silent, steady presence, a true, unsung hero. He often felt like the center was his second home, a place he protected and nurtured. The community center itself was the heart of their town. It was where people gathered, celebrated, and sometimes even healed. It hosted everything from town meetings to bake sales, and of course, those amateur wrestling practices. Arthur knew every creak in the old building, every draft, every hidden corner. He knew the kids by their first names, even if they didn't know his. He'd offer a towel to a sweaty teenager, or a kind word to one who'd lost a match. He was more than just a janitor. He was a part of the fabric of the community, even if no one really noticed. His quiet acts of kindness were just part of who he was. He never expected anything in return, just the satisfaction of a job well done in a safe, clean space for everyone. Then the weather reports started coming in. They weren't good. The local news channels were warning of an unusually severe winter storm, one that was expected to dump feet of snow and bring dangerously low temperatures. It was the kind of storm that made people stock up on groceries and hunker down. A growing concern settled over the town. Residents rushed to prepare, boarding up windows and buying generators. Arthur, ever diligent, began his own preparations at the community center. He checked the furnace, made sure all the windows were latched tight, and cleared the emergency exits. He wanted to make sure the building was as secure as possible, just in case anyone needed it. He had a feeling this wasn't going to be just another snowstorm. As the afternoon wore on, the sky turned a bruised purple, and the wind began to howl. Snow started falling, light at first, then heavier, thicker. The roads were quickly becoming dangerous. That's when they arrived. A huge tour bus, painted with bold, flashy graphics, pulled slowly into the community center parking lot. It looked completely out of place in their sleepy town, especially with the storm raging. 10 men, all of them massive, muscled, and clearly not from around here, stepped out. They were WWE superstars, on their way to a major event. But the escalating storm had brought their journey to a grinding halt. Their bus driver, looking stressed, explained they couldn't go another mile. Local hotels were either booked solid or had already closed their doors due to the worsening conditions. The superstars, clearly frustrated, were looking for a safe place to ride out the storm. They looked tired, cold, and more than a little bewildered to be stuck in a town they'd probably never heard of before. Arthur, watching from the center's entrance, knew he had a problem on his hands, but he also knew, deep down, that he couldn't turn anyone away. especially not in a storm like this. He just stood there, a small elderly man, facing a group of giants, and simply opened the door wider. The 10 WWE superstars, a mix of seasoned veterans and rising stars, really were in a tough spot. Their manager, a sharp woman named Brenda, had been on the phone for what felt like hours, her voice getting tenser with each call. Every hotel within a 100-mile radius was either full, closed, or simply unreachable due to the blizzard. Their million-dollar tour bus, usually a symbol of their success, was now just a fancy metal box stuck in a rapidly deepening snowdrift. The local authorities, when Brenda finally got through to someone, had suggested the community center. It was the only public building still deemed safe and accessible, even if just barely. When Brenda told the superstars about the community gym, there was an audible groan. These were men and women used to luxury suites, personal chefs, and state-of-the-art training facilities. The thought of spending the night on a cold gym floor, surrounded by basketball hoops and dusty mats, wasn't exactly appealing. A gym? Really, Brenda? One of them, a massive man with a thick beard, had grumbled. Can't we just sleep on the bus? It's got beds. But Brenda had explained that the heating on the bus was failing, and staying put was just too risky. They were out of options. With heavy sighs and a lot of muttered complaints, they agreed to go, picturing a run-down, dingy place. Arthur, standing at the entrance, had seen their initial reactions. He knew what they were thinking. He'd seen it before, people judging his community center. But his only thought was their safety. He didn't care who they were or how famous. They were human beings in need of shelter from a dangerous storm. As they finally made their way inside, shaking snow from their designer jackets, Arthur simply nodded. "Welcome," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's not much, but it's warm. The gym floor is clear, and I've got some extra blankets in the back." He led them through the brightly lit hallway, past the trophy cases and bulletin boards, and into the main gymnasium. The superstars were clearly surprised. The gym wasn't what they expected. It was spotless. The wooden floor gleamed, the bleachers were neatly folded, and there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere. Arthur, despite being a janitor, kept the place pristine. He pointed to a stack of clean folded blankets and a large coffee urn on a table nearby. "Help yourselves to coffee. I just brewed it. There's some hot water for tea, too, if anyone prefers." His calm, reassuring demeanor was a stark contrast to the chaos outside and the superstars' own lingering frustration. They tried to be discreet, to blend in, but it was impossible. Their sheer size, their distinctive clothing, even the way they carried themselves, screamed, "Not from around here." One of them, a woman with bright pink hair, pulled out her phone, probably to check for any signal, but the screen just showed no service. Another, wearing a wrestling championship belt over a tracksuit, tried to cover it with his arm, but the gold still glinted. Arthur, however, didn't react to their fame. He treated them like anyone else seeking refuge. He just wanted them to be comfortable and safe. "If you need anything at all," he said, "just ask. I'll be in my office just down the hall." He left them to settle in, giving them space. He went to his small office, a room filled with cleaning supplies and a worn desk, and kept an ear out. The wind outside was picking up, howling around the building like a hungry beast. The snow was now falling so thick that the world beyond the windows had turned into a blurry white sheet. Suddenly the lights flickered, once, twice, then steadied. A collective gasp came from the gym. Arthur walked back out, a flashlight in hand, just in case. "Don't worry," he said. "The generator should kick in if it goes out completely. We've got backup." His calm voice seemed to soothe them. The superstars, realizing the true severity of the storm, began to relax a little. The initial annoyance at their predicament started to give way to a quiet appreciation for the shelter Arthur had provided. They saw the storm's fury through the tall gym windows, the branches whipping back and forth, the snow piling up against the glass. They knew they were lucky to be inside. Some of them started talking quietly, pulling out their phones again, hoping for a miracle signal. Others just sat on the bleachers, watching the blizzard and sipping the hot coffee Arthur had made. The big man with the beard, the one who had complained earlier, walked over to the coffee urn and poured himself a second cup. He looked at Arthur, who was checking a window latch. "Thanks, old man," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. Arthur just smiled and nodded. His simple hospitality, without asking for anything in return, was slowly breaking down their defenses. They were no longer just a group of famous athletes. They were people, stranded, grateful for a warm place and a kind face in the middle of a raging storm. The night was just beginning, and outside, the storm continued its relentless assault. As the night wore on, the storm outside seemed to find a rhythm, a constant roar against the sturdy walls of the community center. Inside, a different kind of rhythm began to emerge. The initial quiet, almost awkward silence slowly gave way to conversation. The superstars, now warmed by coffee and the safety of the gym, started to talk amongst themselves. And then, surprisingly, they started to talk to Arthur. One of them, a woman with a bright, friendly smile, asked Arthur about the town. He told her about its history, the small businesses, the annual fair, and the kids who came through the community center. He spoke about the struggles and the joys of a small-town life, his voice soft but steady. The superstars, used to the bright lights and roaring crowds of arenas, listened with genuine interest. They shared stories too, tales from the road, the endless travel, the physical toll of their profession, the adrenaline of a cheering crowd, and the quiet loneliness of hotel rooms. They talked about their families, their dreams, and even their fears. Arthur, sitting on a folded mat, absorbed it all, nodding occasionally, offering a quiet word of understanding or a gentle chuckle. He didn't just listen, he offered his own brand of wisdom. When one of the younger superstars talked about feeling overwhelmed by the pressure, Arthur spoke about patience. "Life's a lot like this storm, son," he said, gesturing vaguely towards the windows where the blizzard still raged. "Sometimes it just hits you, and all you can do is hold on tight. But it always passes, and when it does, you find out what you're made of." His words weren't preachy or dramatic. They were just simple truths, delivered with the calm assurance of a man who had seen many storms, both literal and metaphorical. He talked about the importance of community, how people needed to lean on each other, especially when things got tough. He spoke about hard work, not just in a job, but in building a life, in maintaining relationships. He believed in looking out for one another, a principle he lived by every day. Slowly, the larger-than-life personas began to fade. The muscle-bound men and women, who usually appeared invincible on television, revealed their vulnerabilities. They talked about injuries, about being away from loved ones, about the constant pressure to perform. They were still impressive, still powerful, but they were also just people. One of the superstars, a giant of a man known for his intimidating ring presence, actually laughed heartily at one of Arthur's stories about a mischievous squirrel in the gym. Another, a woman who usually wore a fierce scowl, asked Arthur how he kept the gym so clean. She even offered to help him sweep up later, a gesture Arthur politely declined, but deeply appreciated. They helped him in small ways, showing their gratitude. When the coffee pot ran low, one of them quietly refilled it. Another helped Arthur carry a stack of extra blankets from a storage closet. These were small acts, but they spoke volumes. The barrier between the famous athletes and the humble janitor dissolved, replaced by a sense of shared humanity. They were all just people trying to get through a difficult night, and in that shared experience, a bond began to form, unexpected and genuine. The gym, which had started as a mere shelter, had become a haven of camaraderie. As the pre-dawn hours approached, the storm's intensity finally began to wane. The howling wind started to die down, replaced by a softer, more consistent whisper. The heavy snowfall lessened, becoming a gentle drift. The sky outside, though still dark, hinted at the approaching morning. A faint, almost imperceptible lightning began to appear on the horizon. The superstars, who had managed to catch a few hours of sleep on the mats and bleachers, started to stir. They woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed, considering their unusual sleeping arrangements. The air was a little chilly, but the sense of safety and gratitude was palpable. Arthur was already up, quietly making a fresh pot of coffee. He moved about the gym, checking the windows, ensuring everything was secure. The superstars, one by one, began to emerge from their sleep. They stretched, yawned, and then, without being asked, began to help clean up. They folded the blankets, stacked the mats neatly, and even wiped down the bleachers. The gym, which had been their sanctuary for the night, was returned to its pristine state, a silent gesture of thanks. The big man with the beard, the one who had been so gruff initially, approached Arthur with a sincere look on his face. "Thank you, Arthur," he said, his voice unusually soft. "Really, you saved us." Arthur just smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He didn't need grand gestures or loud declarations. The quiet respect and gratitude in their eyes were enough. The storm had brought them together, and in doing so, it had forged an unexpected connection, a shared experience that wouldn't soon be forgotten. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to peek through the clouds, promising a new day, and with it, the possibility for the superstars to finally continue their journey. The superstars tour bus, which had been waiting patiently through the night, finally rumbled to life as the snowplows finished clearing the main roads. One by one, the athletes gathered their bags, their movements a little less hurried than when they had first arrived. There was a different atmosphere now, a quiet respect that hadn't been there before. They lined up to shake Arthur's hand, each offering a personal word of thanks. The woman who had offered to sweep the gym gave Arthur a quick, warm hug. Even the gruff giant, who had thanked him earlier, paused for a moment, looking Arthur directly in the eye. "You're a good man, Arthur," he said, his voice deep but sincere. "A real good man." Arthur stood by the gym doors, watching them go. He waved as the bus pulled away, disappearing slowly down the snow-lined street. A sense of quiet satisfaction settled over him. He liked helping people, and seeing these big, famous people show such genuine appreciation made his heart feel a little lighter. He spent the next hour tidying up the last few things in the gym, making sure everything was exactly as it should be. The storm had passed, the superstars were safe, and the community center was ready for another day, even if it was a snow day for most. Once the gym was in perfect order, Arthur decided it was time to check on his own place. He pulled on his heavy coat, grabbed his old worn shovel, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The sun was beginning to break through the clouds, casting long shadows across the pristine snow. It was beautiful, in a way, but also revealed the extent of the storm's impact. Tree branches lay scattered across lawns, some snapped clean off. Power lines, weighed down by ice, sagged precariously. It was clear this had been more than just a regular winter storm. Arthur's house wasn't far, just a few blocks from the community center. He usually walked, and today was no exception, though the deep snow made it a bit of a trek. With each step, the snow crunched under his boots, a rhythmic sound in the otherwise quiet neighborhood. He noticed a few neighbors already out, trying to clear their driveways or assess minor damage. He nodded a greeting to Mrs. Henderson, who was bundled up, looking worriedly at a broken fence post. As he turned the corner onto his street, a knot began to form in Arthur's stomach. Something didn't look right. His breath hitched as he took in the scene. A massive oak tree, a landmark in the neighborhood for decades, had fallen. Not just fallen, but had toppled directly onto his small, unassuming house. The roof was caved in, a gaping hole revealing the dark interior of his living room. Shingles, insulation, and splintered wood were scattered everywhere, buried under a fresh layer of snow. Arthur stopped dead in his tracks, the shovel slipping from his gloved hand and landing softly in the snow. He just stared, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. His home, the place where he had lived for over 40 years, the place that held all his memories, was ruined. The weight of the world seemed to press down on him. He walked slowly forward, each step heavy, until he was standing right in front of the wreckage. The air inside the house, now open to the elements, felt colder than the air outside. He could see his old armchair, covered in snow and debris. His small kitchen, usually so neat, was a mess of broken plaster and shattered dishes. A wave of despair washed over him, a feeling he rarely allowed himself to indulge. Arthur was a man who faced challenges head-on, quietly and without complaint. He had seen hard times, but this felt different. This felt like everything he had worked for, everything he had built, had been taken away in an instant. His savings were modest, barely enough to cover his daily needs, let alone rebuild a house. He wasn't young anymore, and the thought of starting over, of finding a new place, felt like an impossible burden. He had no family nearby, no one to lean on. He stood there for a long time, the cold seeping into his bones, but he barely noticed it. He just looked at the damage, the shattered windows, the exposed walls, the way the snow had already begun to blanket the inside of his home. It wasn't just a house. It was his sanctuary, his history, his entire world. And now it was gone. Or at least, it felt that way. The quiet resilience that usually defined him began to crack. A deep, aching sadness settled in his chest. He didn't cry. Arthur wasn't a crier, but the emptiness he felt was profound. He was a janitor, a man who cleaned up messes. But this was a mess he had no idea how to fix. The realization hit him with a chilling force. He had nowhere to go. The community center was a public building, not a home. He was alone and utterly helpless. The storm had given him a purpose, a chance to help others. But in return, it had taken everything from him. He just stood there, a solitary figure against the backdrop of destruction, the weight of his loss pressing down on him. The news of Arthur's damaged home traveled fast, though not in the way one might expect. Back on the road, one of the WWE superstars, a burly man named Marcus, who had been particularly touched by Arthur's quiet kindness, felt a pang of worry. He'd seen the man's gentle nature, his unassuming demeanor, and the way he genuinely cared for everyone at the gym. Marcus decided to make a call just to check in. He dialed the community center's number, hoping to catch Arthur and thank him again for sheltering them. The center director, a woman named Carol, answered the phone. She recognized Marcus's voice right away. After exchanging pleasantries and hearing his thanks, Marcus asked about Arthur. That's when Carol's voice changed. She told him, her voice tinged with sadness, about Arthur's house. A tree had fallen, the roof was gone, and the old man was devastated. Carol explained that Arthur was a private man, proud, and probably wouldn't ask for help, but she worried deeply about him. Marcus listened, his face growing grim. He thanked Carol and hung up. He didn't hesitate. He walked to the front of their tour bus, where the other 9 superstars were spread out, some playing cards, others looking at their phones. He told them, simply and directly, what had happened to Arthur. He described the damage, the old man's quiet despair, and the fact that Arthur had nowhere to go. A silence fell over the bus. These were men and women used to loud arenas, cheering crowds, and larger-than-life personas. But in that moment, they were just people, remembering the kind janitor who had opened his doors to them during a terrifying storm. They remembered his warm coffee, his simple blanket, and the way he had made them feel safe when they were stranded. "We can't just leave him like that," said a superstar known for his high-flying moves in the ring. "He helped us." Another, a powerful wrestler with a booming voice, nodded. "He didn't ask for anything, just looked out for us." Marcus looked at them. "So what do we do?" Immediately, ideas started flowing. They were accustomed to solving problems, often with brute force, but this was different. This was about rebuilding. One suggested a GoFundMe, but another quickly countered, "That's too slow. He needs help now." The consensus was clear. They had to go back. All of them. They would use their own resources, their own strength. They knew Arthur didn't have much, and he certainly didn't have insurance for something like this. Their manager, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, who usually ran a tight ship, initially balked. "You want to turn around? We have a show in 2 days. This is insane." But she looked at the determined faces of her superstars. They weren't asking, they were telling her. Their conviction was absolute. They reminded her of Arthur's selflessness, how he had put their safety before any rules or protocols. Brenda, for all her toughness, had a soft spot for genuine kindness. She sighed, then pulled out her phone. "All right," she said, "but we're going to need more than just the 10 of us. I'll make some calls. This is going to be big." And big it became. The 10 superstars, united by their gratitude, started reaching out. They called friends, colleagues, and fellow wrestlers within the wider WWE community. They shared Arthur's story, not just as a janitor, but as a silent guardian who had sheltered them, fed them, and offered them a safe haven when they were vulnerable. They painted a picture of a good man who had lost everything because of the same storm that had brought them together. The story resonated deeply. Many superstars remembered being young, struggling, and relying on the kindness of strangers. Others simply felt a pull to help someone so genuinely good. The response was unbelievable. Offers of support started flooding in. It wasn't just money, it was time, labor, and resources. Soon, the initial 10 superstars found themselves with a rapidly growing team. Wrestlers from all over the country, some who had never even met Arthur, volunteered. They heard the story, saw the raw emotion in their colleagues' voices, and felt compelled to act. It quickly surpassed their wildest expectations. Brenda, the manager, was working the phones nonstop. She contacted construction companies they had worked with for stage setups, equipment suppliers, and even catering services. The WWE, as an organization, hearing about the grassroots effort from its biggest stars, threw its weight behind the initiative, providing logistical support and resources. They saw the public relations potential, of course, but more importantly, they saw the genuine heart behind the effort. Within 24 hours of Marcus's phone call, the plan had snowballed into something immense. It wasn't just the 10 superstars anymore. It was nearly 50 WWE superstars, former champions, rising stars, and even some crew members, all volunteering to travel back to Arthur's small town. They were arranging for construction supplies, tools, heavy equipment, and even professional contractors to guide their efforts. The local community, still reeling from the storm, was stunned by the news that a legion of larger-than-life figures, people they only saw on television, were heading their way, not for a wrestling show, but to rebuild a janitor's home. It was a story almost too incredible to believe. The morning after the storm, Arthur was still picking through the wreckage of his small home. He sat on a fallen beam, staring at the sky through the gaping hole where his roof used to be. The cold wind bit at his exposed skin, but he barely noticed. His mind was numb. He had nowhere to go. No idea how he would ever fix this. Then, a rumble started in the distance. It wasn't the wind, it was something else, growing louder by the second. He squinted down his quiet street, usually only disturbed by the mail truck or a neighbor's car. What he saw next made him doubt his own eyes. A massive convoy, unlike anything his town had ever witnessed, was turning onto his road. First, a huge tour bus, gleaming even under the cloudy sky. Then another, and another. Behind them, trucks, big ones, carrying all sorts of equipment. Local residents, drawn by the noise, started appearing at their windows and front doors, their faces a mix of confusion and wonder. The buses pulled up in front of his ruined house, their engines rumbling to a stop. The doors hissed open, and out stepped a parade of men and women. Arthur recognized them instantly, even in their work clothes. The faces he had sheltered just a day before, the very superstars who had filled his gym with their larger-than-life presence, were now standing on his lawn. There were more of them than he remembered, dozens, all looking directly at his house, and then at him. Arthur felt a lump form in his throat. He tried to stand, but his legs felt weak. He watched as Marcus, the first one to step off the bus, walked towards him, followed by the others. Marcus's face was serious, but his eyes held that familiar kindness. "Arthur," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "We heard what happened. We're here to help." Arthur just stared, his mouth slightly open. He couldn't form words. He remembered their promise to never forget his kindness, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Disbelief warred with a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. Tears welled up in his eyes, hot against the cold air. He wiped them away quickly, embarrassed, but the superstars didn't seem to notice. They just watched him with quiet understanding. Soon, the street transformed into a scene of organized chaos. The superstars, despite their lack of professional construction experience, moved with an incredible energy. They didn't stand around waiting for instructions. They were accustomed to teamwork, to following a plan, and to physical exertion. Brenda, the manager, was barking orders into a walkie-talkie, directing trucks to unload materials. Professional contractors, brought in by the WWE, quickly set up a command center, reviewing blueprints and assessing the damage. One group of superstars, their muscles rippling under their work shirts, started hauling away the fallen tree limbs. Another team began carefully removing damaged sections of the roof, working alongside skilled roofers. Their sheer physical strength proved invaluable. What might have taken a small crew days, they accomplished in hours. They formed human chains, passing debris from hand to hand, their movements surprisingly coordinated for a group of people whose usual work involved body slams and suplexes. Arthur watched it all unfold, a silent witness to the whirlwind of activity. He saw the Destroyer carefully stacking damaged planks, while Lightning Legs Linda helped a carpenter measure a new support beam. The apex predator, a wrestler known for his intimidating persona, was actually sweeping debris with a broom, a focused intensity on his face. They worked tirelessly, sweat beading on their foreheads despite the chill. They joked with each other, offered words of encouragement, and kept moving. It was clear this wasn't just a job for them. It was a mission. Their enthusiasm was infectious. Local residents, who had initially only watched from a distance, started to get involved. Mrs. Henderson from next door brought out a tray of hot coffee and homemade cookies. Mr. Peterson, a retired carpenter, grabbed his toolbox and offered his expertise. Teenagers, emboldened by the sight of their heroes working so hard, started clearing smaller debris from Arthur's yard. The street, usually so quiet, buzzed with the sounds of hammers, saws, and cheerful chatter. Arthur found himself sitting on a folding chair someone had set up for him, a warm blanket around his shoulders, a cup of coffee in his hands. He couldn't stop the tears now, but they were tears of pure gratitude. He watched as his shattered house slowly, miraculously, began to take shape again. It wasn't just a construction site. It was a community, powered by an astounding act of kindness. He saw the superstars, these larger-than-life figures, not as heroes of the ring, but as true heroes, rebuilding not just his house, but his hope. The sheer scale of their effort, the genuine care in their actions, was overwhelming. It was more than he could have ever dreamed of. The physical transformation of Arthur's house was astounding. What had been a wreck just hours before was now rapidly turning into a proper home again. The damaged roof, where the massive tree had punched through, was completely gone. In its place, a new, sturdy frame was already taking shape, covered by fresh tarps to protect against any lingering cold. The superstar's sheer physical strength proved invaluable in every step. They lifted heavy beams with ease, tore down damaged sections of wall that would have required specialized equipment for others, and hauled away mountains of debris. Arthur watched, mesmerized, as Iron Mike, a wrestler known for his incredible grip, single-handedly carried large sheets of plywood. The Amazon, a towering female superstar, was up on a ladder, helping to secure roofing materials with surprising precision. They moved with a purpose, a focused intensity that meant every swing of a hammer, every lift, counted. Inside, other superstars worked with the contractors to repair the water-damaged walls and floors. They pulled out soaked insulation, dried out the wood, and began installing new drywall. The precision they showed was remarkable, considering their usual line of work. They learned quickly, taking instructions from the experienced builders and applying themselves with dedication. Arthur saw the same intensity he imagined they showed in the ring, now directed at rebuilding his life. The house wasn't just being fixed, it was being meticulously put back together, piece by careful piece. Arthur, initially reserved and almost shy, slowly began to open up. He found himself sharing stories with the superstars during their short breaks. He told them about his late wife, Martha, and how they had bought this house when they were young. He talked about the small garden he used to keep, and the quiet joy he found in his work at the community center. The superstars listened intently, asking questions, not out of politeness but genuine interest. They didn't treat him like a charity case or an old man. They treated him like a friend, a peer. The rock-solid ranger, a wrestler usually known for his stoic demeanor, sat next to Arthur, sharing a sandwich and talking about his own childhood home. The shared experience of rebuilding, of working side by side for a common good, created an even deeper bond than the one forged in the storm. For the superstars, this wasn't just a mission of gratitude. It was a profound emotional experience. Seeing the direct impact of their actions, the way Arthur's face slowly shifted from despair to hope, gave them a sense of purpose beyond the roar of the crowd. They felt grounded, connected to something real and meaningful. It's easy to get caught up in the glitz and glamour. One superstar, known as the High Flyer, confided to a local reporter, "But this is what truly matters. Helping someone who helped us, someone who asked for nothing." News of this extraordinary act of kindness spread like wildfire. Local news channels picked up the story first, showing footage of the massive convoy and the superstars working tirelessly. Soon, national media outlets arrived, eager to cover the heartwarming tale. Reporters interviewed the superstars, who consistently deflected praise, instead highlighting Arthur's selflessness and quiet heroism. Arthur himself, a man who had lived his entire life out of the spotlight, found himself in front of cameras, looking a little bewildered but always gracious. He spoke simply, from the heart, about how grateful he was. The story focused on the powerful narrative of reciprocity, a simple janitor's kindness during a storm, repaid tenfold by an unexpected band of heroes. The superstars and community members went beyond simply repairing the damage. As the structure of the house was restored, they started to add thoughtful touches. One superstar, who had a surprising knack for interior design, helped pick out new paint colors that were brighter and more cheerful than Arthur's old ones. Another rallied a few of his colleagues to build a small, sturdy ramp leading up to the front door, making it easier for Arthur to get in and out. They replaced old, drafty windows with new, energy-efficient ones, and even installed new light fixtures. The kitchen, once functional but outdated, was given a fresh coat of paint and some minor upgrades. It was clear that they weren't just fulfilling an obligation. They were putting their hearts into it. They wanted Arthur's house to be better than before, a true sanctuary for a man who had offered them one when they needed it most. The local residents, seeing the sheer dedication, continued to contribute, bringing meals, offering to clean, and even donating small items to furnish the home. The entire street swelled with a sense of collective pride in their achievement. Arthur's house was no longer just a house. It was a testament to human connection, to the idea that a single act of kindness can spark an incredible chain reaction of generosity and goodwill. Every nail hammered, every board replaced, was imbued with this shared spirit. The air was filled with the sounds of construction, yes, but also with laughter, camaraderie, and the quiet hum of a community coming together. The physical transformation was almost complete, and with it, a profound emotional healing for Arthur. The day finally came for the big reveal. Arthur stood on the freshly shoveled path, his eyes wide with disbelief as he looked at his house. It wasn't just repaired, it was transformed. The old, sagging roof was gone, replaced by sturdy new shingles that gleamed in the winter sun. The windows, once clouded and drafty, were now crystal clear, letting in so much light. The faded paint was gone, replaced by a warm, inviting shade of blue with crisp white trim. Even the little porch, which had always been a bit wobbly, was now solid and welcoming, complete with the new ramp they had installed. A small crowd had gathered. The 10 superstars who had first stayed with him were there, along with many of the other 40 who had come to help. Local residents, who had also contributed in countless ways, stood alongside them. A few news cameras were still present, capturing the moment. One of the superstars, a giant of a man with a surprisingly gentle voice, stepped forward. "Arthur," he said, his voice carrying clearly, "this is for you, from all of us. A small thank you for your big heart." He gestured towards the house with an open hand. Arthur didn't say anything for a long moment. He just looked at the house, then at the faces around him, his eyes glistening. He walked slowly towards the front door, touching the new railing of the ramp. He pushed open the door and gasped. The interior was just as beautiful. The fresh paint, the new fixtures, and even some simple, comfortable furniture that had been donated filled the space. It felt like home, but a better, brighter version of it. Turning back to the crowd, Arthur finally found his voice, though it was thick with emotion. I don't know what to say," he managed, a single tear tracing a path down his weathered cheek. "Thank you, all of you. This is more than I could have ever imagined." It was a simple, heartfelt speech, and it was enough. Arthur's life, in many ways, was indeed transformed. He still worked at the community center, still swept the floors and made sure everything was in order. But there was a new spring in his step. He was no longer just the quiet janitor. He was a local legend, the man whose kindness brought an army of wrestling giants to his doorstep. People greeted him with more than just a nod. They stopped to chat, to ask how he was doing, to remind him of the incredible story. His humility remained, a core part of who he was, but his spirit was undeniably uplifted. He knew he was cared for, that his small acts of compassion had resonated in ways he could never have predicted. He often found himself sitting on his new porch, sipping a cup of coffee, just looking at his beautiful home, a constant reminder of the extraordinary generosity he had received. The superstars, too, reflected on the experience long after they had returned to their demanding schedules. In interviews and quiet moments backstage, they often brought up Arthur. "It really puts things in perspective," one of them mused during a podcast. "We're out there, performing for thousands. But it was Arthur, a man who asked for nothing, who taught us the most important lesson about what it means to be strong, to be a true hero." Another superstar, known for his flashy persona, spoke about how grounding the experience had been. "You get so caught up in the show, the travel, the fame. But spending those days with Arthur, getting our hands dirty, building something real, it was humbling. It reminded us that we're all just people, and that helping each other is the greatest victory." The story became a powerful narrative within the WWE community, a tale of gratitude and unexpected connection that was passed around and celebrated. It was a reminder that the biggest muscles weren't always the most important ones. The story of Arthur and the WWE superstars became far more than just a local news item. It grew into a powerful example of human kindness, a testament to the idea that a simple act of compassion can ripple outwards, creating waves of generosity and goodwill. It showed that gratitude, when genuine, has an incredible power to manifest in the most unexpected and heartwarming ways. The enduring legacy wasn't just a rebuilt house. It was the renewed belief in the power of community, in the profound impact of mutual respect, and in the quiet heroism of everyday people. Arthur, the humble janitor, had opened his door and his heart to strangers, and in return, he received not just a home, but a lasting symbol of human connection that would inspire for years to come. It was a story everyone needed to hear, a reminder that even in the biggest storms, kindness can always find a way to shine through, leaving behind something stronger and more beautiful than before.